You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
In blow to defund movement, defund the police, 50% right now. In blow to that movement, Minneapolis residents vote against replacing the city's police department. I've mentioned this in previous podcasts. It's been a big thing since Tuesday, the elections on November 2nd. Minneapolis, they kind of said, that whole replacing the department with these other replacements for the police, we're not going down that road. So that's what we're talking about today. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news from that perspective. Now, why are we doing the defund the police movement and question number 2 on the Minneapolis ballot for a real estate podcast in Seattle? Excellent question. And the way I typically answer that is there's this tiny little thing in life called public safety. And if you have communities that have strong public safety, like where I am here recording this for you in Bellevue, which is a suburb of Seattle, I've got strong public safety here. Police, phenomenal job. They're not being defunded. They're happy with where they're at. They're not quitting in record numbers. City of Seattle proper, it's a little different story. That's a little different story. And if you've been living under a rock, maybe you haven't followed what's happened, but literally hundreds of police officers have left the police department. They were threatened to be defunded by 50% during the whole Chop Chaz thing, which was our city government basically gave up a section of Capitol Hill and Seattle and just said, hey, you know what, police department, you guys need to evacuate your East Precinct there. We're going to give this up to the mostly peaceful protesters who ended up, killing one person and another person was killed and there's lawsuits and just a whole thing, it's a train wreck. It's a mess. That's not happening here in Bellevue, but it's happening in Seattle. And I think Minneapolis is like, okay, we understand that our city was on the front line of the whole George Floyd thing. However, we're not, as an entire community, we're not really willing to go down this road either. That's what we're talking about. Despite widespread criticism of their police department and its conduct, voters in Minneapolis have decided that they do not want a new model of public safety implemented in their city. They voted and they said, no. During Tuesday's city elections, voters' ballots included a question asking them if they want to replace the Minneapolis Police Department with a new Department of Public Safety, which would take a public health approach to addressing safety issues. 56% of the voters rejected the ballot questions. They needed 51% to pass that through. So it was closer than I was hoping. But a no on this one, I'm okay with that. For the citizens of Minneapolis, this should be a wake-up call to politicians who want to simply abolish and defund police department. Police officers were their communities and place public safety and justice for crime victims on the forefront of their daily actions. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but you get the gist. Cops are there to protect you. Maybe you're of the belief that they're not and you want to abolish them and get something else put together. But until I see that other thing put together, you got to go with what you got. And if you need some reform, put some money towards that. Make that make sense. Because what's happening right now in a lot of these cities is crime has gone up, specifically gun violence, murder rate. I mean, it's been record setting. And a lot of these records go back to the 80s and early 90s when gang violence was a massive, massive deal. And we had the whole drug thing, the war on drugs and, just all kinds of stuff. And that's kind of looked back at the peak of violence. And we're right back there. Here we are, 2021, right back there. Let's work together for increased safety for all instead of pursuing reckless policies which only empower criminals. What? Somebody is saying that defunding the police and abolishing the police is reckless and only empowers criminals? That would have been something that, you would have been chastised for in the summer of 2020. That would not have been a political an opinion that politically would have. I wouldn't have floated. You would have been just Regardless of tonight's outcome, there's broad agreement that Minneapolis residents want more tools for public safety. I was just talking about in my last podcast, Portland residents kind of coming full circle and saying we need our police to be able to use some of the tools they used to use to handle some of these criminals, because they don't have enough tools, and we want them to do what they used to do, which was settle this city down. But city council and the mayor in Portland, they can't figure out whether they're coming or going, and I don't have a lot of hope for Portland in the short term. Portland, some of the Portland residents are like, "Oh, that's the big deal. This is normal. Portland's got the best eats in the country." I mean, you literally see these polls and you're like, okay, you might have the best food and you might be the biggest food city in the United States, but you could also get killed eating your lunch. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, okay. There's also consensus that the status quo is not an option. We are urgently waiting for action by the Department of Justice to hold the Minneapolis Police Department accountable and will not stop organizing for change. Brooke Adams and Elaine Farhart of Take Action Minnesota, a part of People's Action Organization, said in a joint statement, I think people do want more tools for public safety. They also want more cops right now, and they're tired of waiting, and they're making their voice known through the most recent elections. Since the murder of George Floyd at the hands of former Minneapolis Police Department officer Derek Chauvin in 2020, activists, reformers, and community leaders in the city have been widely seen at the forefront of the Defund the Police movement. And if you haven't heard, that's kind of over. We don't really reference that. And if you're a politician that you were seeking re-election or seeking election for the first time, yeah, you're going to identify as something other than supporting the Defund the Police movement. Yeah, I didn't support it, fully. I was kind of on the peripheral. You know what I mean? It's just like, nah, you tweeted out what you tweeted out. We all see it. You need to own up to it. You're not getting reelected. And so the whole Defund the Police movement, which aims to reduce police departments' budgets and instead invest funds into communities and neighborhoods directly to address wider sociocultural inequities that are seen as impacting crime rates. All right, there's that. And I'm a big proponent of that. But you've also got to have enough boots on the ground cops to basically tell the criminals, we're not going to accept this. You got to have that. And we're at that struggle. We're on the struggle bus there right now. Because, just a few months ago, it was the big thing, defund the police by 50% now. And then now it's not. And so people are looking around going, what do we do? What do we do? Because if we actually hire a bunch more cops, people are going to lose their minds. Yep, they are. And it's the very vocal far left that's going to lose their minds. And maybe we don't care about them anymore. We're going to find out, right? I don't know. I mean, I say that, and yet I just kind of say out loud some of the things I'm thinking at times. And that's not always the brightest move, but I'll do it anyway. I think the voices were heard loud and clear that this is what you think. And then I think the reality is the Defund the Police movement, it just didn't really come to fruition in the way that, some might have envisioned. There is also the argument that defunding means abolishing police departments outright. But this is a position receiving much less mainstream support because it's an even worse idea than just defunding the police. I call it 50%, like the proponents of Chop and Chaz were indicating. That is yesterday's narrative, defund the police. In the immediate aftermath of Floyd's death, the Minneapolis City Council announced that it would disband the police department. The decision soon came under fire from community members as well as the larger political establishment and was eventually scrapped after being voted down. $8 million was cut from the police budget last year, but that only amounted to around 4% of its $179 million budget. But it was more the impact on the psyche of the police officers. All right, we didn't get cut down, but they would love to cut us. You know, those nut jobs in the far left, they would love to cut us down to the point where we don't exist and our politicians aren't backing us. And this is a free-for-all on cops. Yeah. About that retirement, I think I'm going to take that. That job offer I had in this city where they believe in public safety, I'm going to take that. Blue flu? Oh, I'm not feeling good. Might take some time off. Let some of this kind of settle. A lot of that going on. A couple hundred cops here in the city of Seattle. Just, doing something else. This campaign began with working class black and brown residents marching together to demand a higher standard of public safety in the city. Okay, here's the thing. In Seattle, it wasn't a lot of black and brown residents. It was a lot of white Antifa residents who were piggybacking on the whole Black Lives Matter deal, right? I mean, that's what it was. I was there. I stood there and looked at them and videotaped them and live streamed them. It wasn't black and brown residents. It was some nut job Antifa people, white people. It grew into a citywide movement that spanned race, income, and neighborhoods to give residents a say in their future and to advocate for the resources that they need. Karenia Smith, the campaign manager for Yes Minneapolis, said in a statement, "This is not the result that we hoped for. The story of our movement must be told." So you've got that whole Black Lives Matter thing, and Defund the Police is part of that because Black Lives Matter, the actual organization, believes in getting rid of basically a ton of fundamental systems in the United States, open borders, get rid of the judicial system, police, out the window, got to replace them with something else. I mean, yeah, some just, stuff that the vast majority of the United States has recently said in these elections, yeah, we're not entirely on board with that at all. And then here in Seattle, you've got, we did have Black Lives Matter protests, but a lot of what devolved into the violent protests, you couldn't even tell who it was. It was just people kind of hijacking each other's movements, and it was anarchy. It was just chaos. I mean, let's put it that simply. And then people got killed, and then it was over, and everybody's like, wow, that was a head scratcher. Boy, sure put Seattle on the map. Not in a good way. Even with the efforts from activists on the ground to explain how the process of defunding could work, there still appears to be a disconnect on the meaning of the term and its implementation. In the political arena, the term has been widely weaponized and used to stoke concerns over crime. In and after the 2020 election cycle in particular, disagreements within the Democratic Party were also apparent, with moderates and pundits arguing the issue would impact their successes in swing suburban districts. All right, so we saw that almost immediately, right? Do you remember that? And you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to tell the Democrats how to run their show, but I would probably shut up on that whole defunding the police thing because that doesn't look like that's helping them. But if you're on the other side, you're like, keep saying defund the police. Keep going with that. Because I think the voting public is like, I'm not really sure that's where we should be at. And if you're in one of these communities being impacted, you're looking for more cops. And nobody's looking for fewer cops. Let's be honest. That's just how it's going. So it's been clear since the beginning that the political establishment was going to do everything they could to undermine this campaign, including lying, spreading misinformation, and attempting to block this vote from happening in court, Adams and Farhart said in their said in their joint statement. Okay, lying and spreading misinformation. I don't think you have to lie, and I don't think you have to spread misinformation about how you perceive things going if you eradicate the existing law and order system and throw something else in place of it that you haven't really stress test. I mean, that's kind of basic business principles. Let's see how this goes before we do a full implementation. How many companies have not taken that advice, ran with a business concept, say like Zillow right now in their house flipping business, their iBuying business? What happened to that? Yeah, they just shut it down. Yeah. Interesting. It was a business model based on principles that, were really exposed some volatility in the marketplace. And you could say the same thing about some of these political campaigns, defunding the police by 50%. Let's just see how this goes without stress testing it. And I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be good. It'll be good until it's not. Since Floyd was killed, Minneapolis and many other cities across the country have experienced an increase in gun violence. Over 500 people have been injured by gunfire in the city, a 26% increase from last year, according to the Minneapolis Police Department. There's also been 79 homicides this year in the city as of November 3rd, compared to 80 that happened in all of last year. So, city of Portland just surpassed the record. I think the record in a year was 69, and that was as of a couple of weeks ago. I believe we had 70 and 71 and a double murder here recently. Portland, they're going to put up some numbers that are going to be hard to beat. And that's not a joking thing. I mean, you can't joke about people's lives being lost. That's horrible. Yeah, what do you say to that? I mean, sorry, citizens. I mean, how far does that go? Not very far at all. Figure it out, folks. And by that, I mean the politicians who can't seem to agree on anything in Portland. Activists in Minneapolis are not letting the loss slow them down. Their hope is that they can continue to build. I'm reading this from Time, if you haven't figured that out. Activists in Minneapolis are not letting Time magazine. It used to be Time magazine was a good publication, and you'd like reference them in your schoolwork and stuff in school, back when I used to learn. I don't know. But now you read it and you're like, this is fairly biased. But if you can read something and still get your point across from the other side, hey, you're golden. Activists in Minneapolis are not letting the loss slow them down. Their hope is that they can continue to build on the work that they've done in the past year and a half to attempt to better combat this violence. Which violence are we talking about? We're talking about the police now, or are we talking about the gun violence, or which? It's all so confusing, isn't it? We changed the conversation about what public safety should look like. No, the voters pretty much just said, we want the old system back. So we changed the conversation about what public safety should look like. We showed the country and the world the power of democracy. Is that what that was? That was democracy. I thought it looked different than that. I thought it looked different than CHOP, but I don't know. I'm a real estate guy, so I guess I don't really understand that whole, quote unquote democracy thing. And the power of the people. Okay, the power of the people shooting each other. Yeah, that wasn't good. No. Or the power of the people, smashing windows and vandalizing stores. That power of the people, that one? Yeah, I wasn't on board with that either. I was a no-go. I'm a business guy. People try and feed their families with, business operations. And when you randomly bash in their windows and go steal their stuff time and time and time again, that's not a sustainable business model. And that's, in real estate terms, external obsolescence, because you're in a location where if that stuff is allowed to happen by your politicians, you might move your business. That's cause and effect right there. So now we will work to hold leaders in the system accountable. Okay. So that we can get back to the democracy of the summer of 2020 and the power of the people. All right. We will work to heal our city and create safer streets for all our communities, Smith said in her statement. Okay. Yeah. And that is the end goal, but it just seems like defunding the police and all this other stuff that doesn't really have a game plan. There's no plan B in case plan A doesn't work out. Disastrous. But then I think, that's what people are talking about. They're like, that's not reasonable. That doesn't make any sense at all. What are we doing here? And yet it took, getting this far down the road because most people are just head down, doing their thing, doing their life. Oh, I got to get little Johnny to basketball practice today. Defund the police, that's a stupid idea. But whatever, Johnny's late for practice. We got to get him to school. Or, oh man, what was I going to put on the grocery list? What was I going to add to the grocery list? I can't remember. Defund the police. Huh, what? There's no way. Yeah, what was that I was going to stick? Was it Gatorade for little Johnny during practice? I can't remember. Oh, my car tabs are expired. I got to renew my car tabs. And, and the whole defund police thing happens and people are like, and then it gets to the polls and they're like, what? No. And they check that no box for whatever it is. Massive generalization. But that's kind of just what happened, right? I mean, you're seeing it in races across the United States. Yeah. I think people kind of figured out, well, maybe that's not the greatest call in the world. We know that because we're reasonable people, right? I mean, that's just the way this goes. And yet, you might say, well, Sean, you're minimizing what could be from moving funds into other areas. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm more inclined to say, hire some more cops, figure out the rest later. You need to get this stuff under control because it's not going the right direction right now. And I'm not a law enforcement guy. Don't take my advice 100%. Don't hire a bunch of cops based on what I said. But if you did, I would take 100% credit. Why wouldn't I? All right. That's enough of me being a jackass. Okay. I'm done on this podcast. We'll catch up soon on the next one. Till then, stay safe. Make good decisions. I know you will because you're reasonable. We'll talk soon. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.